The old man stood alone beneath the flickering streetlight, clutching a bouquet of white lilies as tears rolled silently down his weathered face. Luxury cars rushed past without slowing, yet every Friday, at exactly 6:15 p.m., America's richest billionaire returned to the same forgotten bus stop. Then, on the 25th anniversary, a city bus finally stopped, the doors hissed open, and a woman stepped down holding a faded brown envelope with his name written across it. For the first time in decades, Jonathan Mercer forgot how to breathe. The driver watched in confusion as the 72-year-old billionaire froze beside the cracked bench. Jonathan had built Mercer Technologies into one of America's most valuable companies, donated billions to hospitals and veteran charities, and advised presidents on economic policy. Yet every Friday evening, he disappeared without security, cameras, or headlines. The ritual belonged only to him. The woman looked to be in her early 50s. Her coat was worn but carefully pressed. She studied Jonathan's face before extending the envelope. Margaret asked that this be delivered only if you were still waiting. Jonathan's hands trembled. "Margaret," he whispered. The woman nodded gently. "She passed away last month." The words struck harder than any business failure ever could. Jonathan closed his eyes, unable to hide the grief spreading across his face. Around him, strangers hurried home, unaware they were passing one of the wealthiest men in America, while his entire world quietly collapsed beside a city bus stop. Inside the envelope rested a single handwritten letter and an old bus ticket dated 25 years earlier. His heartbeat quickened. The woman quietly walked away without another word. Jonathan unfolded the letter with shaking fingers. "Dear Jonathan, if this reaches you, it means you kept your promise. I prayed you wouldn't waste your life waiting, but deep inside, I knew you would." His vision blurred. 25 years earlier, before the billion-dollar empire, before magazine covers and television interviews, Jonathan had been an ambitious engineer struggling to keep a tiny software company alive in Seattle. Every Friday after work, he met Margaret Collins at that same bus stop. She was a public school music teacher whose laughter made impossible weeks feel manageable. One rainy evening, Jonathan had asked her to marry him. She smiled through tears and said yes. 3 days later, she disappeared. No would-be, no explanation, only silence. Friends insisted she had changed her mind. Others claimed she found someone wealthier. Jonathan refused to believe any of them. Every Friday afterward, he returned to the bus stop anyway. 1 year became 5. 5 became 10. As his company exploded into a global technology giant, assistants begged him to stop. Board members questioned the strange routine. Reporters occasionally noticed the mysterious Friday disappearances, but Jonathan never answered. He always believed love deserved one more chance than logic allowed. Back in the present, Jonathan continued reading. "I never abandoned you because I stopped loving you." His chest tightened. "My father discovered your proposal. He had secretly borrowed money from dangerous men. They threatened to kill you if I married you. They believed your growing company would become valuable someday." Jonathan stared in disbelief. "I agreed to disappear only after they promised they would leave you alive. I carried that guilt every single day." The letter slipped slightly in his hands. Everything he had believed for 25 years had been a lie created by someone else's greed. A cold wind swept through the empty street. Jonathan looked toward the arriving buses, remembering every lonely Friday he had spent hoping to see Margaret step through those doors. He had blamed fate. Instead, corruption had stolen the future they planned together. Then another folded page fell from the envelope. It wasn't written by Margaret. It was signed by an attorney. Jonathan unfolded it slowly. The document explained that new evidence had recently surfaced during the settlement of Margaret's estate. Financial records, sworn statements, and sealed court documents proved that her father had not acted alone. Someone inside Jonathan's own company had secretly financed the criminals who forced Margaret to disappear. Jonathan's face lost all color. Only 4 executives had known about his engagement 25 years ago. 3 were dead. 1 was still alive. Jonathan whispered the name that had built fortunes beside him for decades. Richard. At that exact moment, Jonathan's phone rang. His private investigator spoke only 6 chilling words. "Richard knows you found the letter." Richard Hale didn't wait for Jonathan Mercer to make the first move. Before the call ended, security cameras at Mercer Technologies captured Richard calmly walking into the executive boardroom, smiling as though nothing had changed. He had served beside Jonathan for 25 years, earning the trust of employees, investors, and charities across America. No one suspected that behind the polished smile stood the man who had destroyed 2 lives for power. Jonathan arrived at headquarters without alerting anyone. He carried Margaret's letter inside his jacket pocket like the most valuable document he had ever owned. Instead of confronting Richard publicly, he quietly instructed the company's legal team to preserve every financial record dating back 25 years. Federal investigators were contacted before sunrise. Jonathan wanted facts, not revenge. Hours later, investigators uncovered a hidden trail of shell companies, offshore accounts, and secret payments stretching back decades. Richard had secretly funded the men who threatened Margaret's family, believing Jonathan would become completely consumed by work if his personal life collapsed. The plan worked exactly as intended. Jonathan buried himself in building Mercer Technologies while Richard quietly gained influence, wealth, and control over the empire. When confronted with the evidence, Richard remained unerringly calm. "You became the richest man in America because of what happened," he said coldly. "Without that heartbreak, none of this would exist." Jonathan looked at him silently. "No fortune is worth stealing someone's future," he replied. Richard laughed. "People only remember winners." Jonathan slowly placed Margaret's letter on the conference table. "No," he answered. "People remember character." The federal agents entered moments later. Richard's confidence vanished as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Employees watched in stunned silence while the executive they had admired for decades was escorted through the lobby. News helicopters circled above the building within minutes. America woke to headlines exposing one of the largest corporate conspiracies in recent history. Days later, Jonathan attended Margaret Collins' funeral in a quiet cemetery outside Seattle. He stood alone after everyone else had left. Fresh white lilies rested beside her headstone, the same flowers he had carried to the bus stop every Friday. He gently placed the worn bus ticket beneath the bouquet before whispering, "The promise was never broken." A soft breeze moved through the trees as afternoon sunlight settled across the grass. For the first time in 25 years, Jonathan felt the weight on his heart begin to lift. Margaret's former students approached him one by one. They shared stories of how she had spent her life helping children from struggling families, buying instruments with her own salary, and refusing recognition for her kindness. She had never married. She had never stopped loving the man she believed she had saved. Jonathan quietly wiped away a tear. To honor her memory, he announced the creation of the Margaret Collins Foundation, funding music education in every underserved public school district across America. Thousands of children received instruments, scholarships, and opportunities that had once seemed impossible. At the dedication ceremony months later, a children's orchestra performed the song Margaret had loved most. Jonathan sat in the front row without speaking. As the final note echoed through the concert hall, every child stood and applauded him instead. He gently shook his head and pointed toward Margaret's portrait hanging above the stage. The applause turned toward her. That single gesture reminded everyone why Jonathan Mercer had earned the respect of millions. His greatest victory was never the billions he had built. It was refusing to let betrayal turn him into a bitter man. Every Friday evening afterward, the old bus stop remained exactly where it had always been. Jonathan still visited it, but he no longer came to wait. He came to remember. Sometimes he sat quietly on the weathered bench, watching strangers board buses, smiling at children laughing with their parents, grateful that love had found justice even if it arrived years too late. The richest man in America finally walked away from that bus stop with empty hands, but a peaceful heart. Because some promises are not measured by the person who returns. They're measured by the one who never stops keeping them.